It was love at first sight, but he thought she was married because of the ring on her finger. Turns out it was a keepsake from her late mom. Daniel Kwon had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking. But the moment he saw her standing in the rain outside his company's gala, everything inside him shifted. She wasn't dressed like the socialites inside. No diamonds. No entourage. Just quiet strength. And that silver ring. He noticed it immediately. And just like that he stepped back. Because Daniel Kwon did not chase married women. So he walked away from the only woman who ever made his heart race. What he didn't know. That ring wasn't a wedding band. It was the last thing her mother gave her before she died. And fate had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because the woman he let go was about to become the one who would either save his empire or destroy it. The ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, light scattering across polished marble floors like fragments of broken stars. Seoul's elite had gathered for the annual Kwon Foundation Charity Gala. Politicians, heirs, models, CEOs, and people who smiled with secrets tucked neatly behind their teeth. Daniel Kwon stood at the center of it all. Tall, immaculate, untouchable. At 34, he was the youngest billionaire CEO in the country, known for turning struggling companies into empires and rivals into ruins. His tailored black tuxedo fit him like power itself. Conversations stopped when he walked past. Investors waited for his nod. Women studied him like an opportunity. But Daniel felt nothing. Until he saw her. She wasn't trying to be noticed. Standing near the balcony doors, half hidden by ivory curtains swaying gently in the night breeze, was a woman in a midnight blue dress. Her blonde hair was loosely pinned, soft waves brushing her shoulders. She wasn't networking. She wasn't performing. She was looking at the city skyline as if it were a painting only she understood. Then she smiled. Not at anyone. Just softly. Daniel's heartbeat faltered. He didn't believe in love at first sight. He believed in numbers, strategy, control. Yet something inside him shifted violently, like tectonic plates colliding beneath a calm surface. As if sensing his gaze, she turned. Their eyes met. The world narrowed to silence. Her eyes were gray, storm gray, luminous under chandelier light. Surprise flickered across her face, then curiosity. No recognition. No calculation. Just awareness. Daniel took a step toward her before his mind caught up. And that was when he saw it. The ring. Simple. Silver. Worn smooth with time. On her left hand. His chest tightened. Married. Of course she would be. Someone like her wouldn't be alone. Daniel stopped himself mid-step, retreating into the comfort of restraint. He had rules. And one of them was simple. Never pursue what already belongs to. He turned away, but not before memorizing her. An hour later, fate cornered him. The elevator doors slid shut with only the two of them inside. Close enough now he noticed details he had missed. Faint freckles across her nose, the slight tremble in her fingers, as though large crowds unsettled her. "You're Daniel Kwon," she said softly. "And you are." His voice remained calm, but something restless stirred beneath it. Eleanor Hale. The name settled in his chest. The elevator stalled briefly between floors. Silence stretched. He shouldn't ask. He shouldn't care. But the words slipped out. "Your husband didn't come tonight?" Her expression changed instantly. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Something deeper. She looked down at her hand, thumb brushing over the silver band. "My mother's," she said quietly. "She passed away when I was 17. This is all I have left of her." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. "I'm not married." The words were simple, but they felt like a door opening. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to truly look at her without guilt. "I'm sorry," he said, softer than he had spoken to anyone in years. "She used to tell me," Eleanor continued, eyes glistening faintly, "that love isn't about possession. It's about devotion. I wear it so I don't forget what real love looks like." The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. Something fragile and powerful passed between them. Not lust. Not convenience. Recognition. And in that quiet moment, Daniel Kwon, who had built an empire by calculating risk, made the most dangerous decision of his life. He decided to fall. He just didn't know yet that loving Eleanor Hale would cost him everything. The night should have ended at the elevator. It didn't. After the doors opened, Eleanor stepped out first, but not far. The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter, lined with tall glass panels revealing the glittering Seoul skyline. Moonlight spilled across the marble floor like liquid silver. Daniel followed. He didn't know why. He only knew that walking away now would feel like losing something he hadn't even touched yet. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys events like this," Eleanor said gently, folding her arms as the cool night air drifted in from the slightly open balcony doors. "I don't," Daniel replied. "But I host them." She smiled faintly. "That sounds lonely." No one had ever said that to him. Not investors. Not board members. Not the women who chased his name. Lonely. The word lingered longer than it should have. They stepped onto the balcony together. Below them, the Han River shimmered beneath the city lights. The wind caught Eleanor's hair, brushing it softly across her cheek. Instinctively, Daniel reached out, then stopped himself. He wasn't that man. "Your mother," he said instead. "She must have been extraordinary." Eleanor's gaze softened, but there was something else now, something guarded. "She was strong," she replied. "Stronger than people gave her credit for." A pause. "She believed love should never be used as a weapon." The sentence felt deliberate. Daniel studied her carefully. "Why would you say that?" Eleanor turned her hand slightly, the silver ring catching the moonlight. "Because sometimes," she said quietly, "people fall in love with illusions." There it was. A shift. Subtle but real. Daniel felt it like a crack forming beneath polished glass. "Are you warning me?" he asked. "Should I be?" she countered. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was charged. Magnetic. Dangerous. Inside the ballroom, applause erupted as someone finished a speech. Neither of them moved. "Tell me something honest," Eleanor said suddenly. Daniel raised a brow. "What's the worst thing you've ever done in business?" The question hit sharper than expected. Daniel Kwon had built his empire by making hard decisions. Ruthless ones. He had acquired companies, restructured entire boards, shut down failing divisions without blinking. But tonight, standing beneath moonlight beside a woman wearing her mother's ring, those decisions didn't feel distant. "They call me ruthless," he admitted. "I call it necessary." Eleanor watched him closely. Too closely. "And do you sleep well at night?" He held her gaze. Yes. It was a lie. For a brief second, something flickered across her face. Pain? Disappointment? Satisfaction? It disappeared just as quickly. "I should go," she said softly. Daniel felt urgency rise in his chest. "Will I see you again?" She hesitated. And that hesitation said more than any answer. "Maybe," she whispered. As she walked away, Daniel noticed something he hadn't before. When she thought he wasn't looking, her expression changed. The softness vanished. In its place was resolve. And something heavier. Purpose. Daniel remained on the balcony long after she left, unaware that across the street, inside a dark sedan, someone had just taken photographs of the two of them standing close beneath silver moonlight. Unaware that Eleanor had known exactly where to stand. Unaware that this wasn't coincidence. And somewhere deep inside her purse, beneath her phone and lipstick, was a folded document bearing the Kwon Industries logo. Moonlight. Silver. And a secret waiting to be uncovered. Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. He searched for her. Not through private investigators. Not through corporate databases. But personally. 3 days after the gala, he found himself standing in front of a quiet art restoration studio tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop in Itaewon. The sign read, Hale Restoration Atelier. The windows were large but modest. Inside, soft golden light glowed against exposed brick walls. Paintings, some cracked with age, others faded by time, rested on easels like patients waiting for surgery. He stepped in. The faint scent of oil paint and varnish filled the air. And there she was. Eleanor stood in front of a centuries-old portrait, sleeves rolled up, blonde hair tied loosely back. She wore no evening gown today. Just a cream blouse smudged faintly with color, jeans, and quiet focus. She looked real. Not like the moonlit mystery from the gala. She didn't notice him at first. She was too absorbed, delicately brushing solvent across fractured paint. "You're removing damage," Daniel said softly. She startled slightly, then turned. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something warmer. "Mr. Kwon," she said. "You found me. I said I hope to see you again. And I said maybe." A small smile passed between them. Daniel stepped closer to the painting. It was a portrait of a woman whose face had been dulled by time. "It looks ruined," he observed. Eleanor tilted her head. "No," she corrected gently. "It looks neglected." She dipped her brush again, steady and patient. "Most people think restoration is about making something new," she continued. "It's not. It's about revealing what was always there." Her words lingered in the air. Daniel watched her hands, careful, precise, almost reverent. "And what if what's underneath isn't beautiful?" he asked quietly. Eleanor paused. "Then you decide whether it's worth saving." There was a loaded silence in that answer. He felt it. She was speaking about more than paint. Daniel glanced around the studio, noticing framed certificates, old photographs, and finally, a black and white picture tucked near her desk. A younger Eleanor standing beside a tall man in a tailored suit, blonde like her, smiling proudly. Daniel's chest tightened. Her father. Was he in the art world too? Daniel asked casually. Eleanor's back stiffened just slightly. "No," she said. "Finance." The word dropped heavier than expected. Daniel didn't miss it. "He believed in building things," she added, "until someone decided they weren't worth keeping." Something flickered in her eyes. Not sadness. Resentment. It vanished quickly, replaced by calm professionalism. She set the brush down and met his gaze. "Why are you really here, Daniel?" He wasn't used to being questioned like that. "I wanted to see where you feel most alive," he answered honestly. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. "You shouldn't romanticize me," she warned softly. "And why not?" "Because you don't know what I'm capable of." There it was again. A crack in the softness. Daniel stepped closer, not touching her but close enough to feel her warmth. "Then tell me." Eleanor held his gaze for a long moment. And for a split second, just a split second, her composure slipped. Something conflicted. Something unresolved. But then, her phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Instead, she flipped the phone face down. "I have work to finish," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, but as he walked toward the door, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. Because in a studio filled with broken masterpieces waiting to be restored, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was the one being studied. And somewhere deep down, Eleanor wasn't just restoring paintings. She was uncovering truths. Daniel Kwon had built his empire on certainty. Numbers made sense. Contracts made sense. Power made sense. Feelings did not. Yet somehow, for the third time that week, he found himself outside Eleanor's studio, this time without a reason he could disguise as curiosity. He didn't call ahead. He didn't send flowers. He simply walked in. The bell above the door chimed softly. Eleanor looked up from her desk, surprise warming her features. "You're becoming predictable," she said. Daniel almost smiled. "That's never been said about me." She studied him carefully. Tonight, he wasn't in a sharp tuxedo or boardroom suit. He wore a simple dark coat, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled. He looked less like a CEO, more like a man. "Coffee?" she offered. "I don't drink coffee after 6. It's chamomile." He hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the floor instead of chairs, backs resting against the brick wall, steaming mugs between their hands. The studio lights were dimmer now, casting soft shadows across half-finished canvases. For a long moment neither spoke. And for once the silence wasn't heavy. It was safe. "You ever get tired?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Of winning?" The question almost made him laugh. "No one's ever asked me that." "I'm asking." Daniel stared at the ceiling, searching for an answer he had never allowed himself to consider. "Yes," he admitted finally. "Winning means someone else loses." Eleanor turned her head toward him. "And that bothers you?" "It didn't used to." Something shifted in the air. He felt it. She felt it. Daniel exhaled slowly. When I took over as CEO, I was 28. The board didn't think I was ready, so I made bold decisions. Aggressive ones. I shut down failing companies, sold divisions, restructured entire firms. His jaw tightened slightly. I told myself it was survival. And was it? She asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her. I don't know anymore. It was the most honest thing he had said in years. Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly around her mug. You're not what people think you are, she murmured. Neither are you. Their eyes locked. This time neither looked away. Daniel reached for her hand, slowly giving her time to pull back. She didn't. Her fingers were warm, steady. But beneath that steadiness, he felt tension. Conflict. Eleanor, he said quietly, voice stripped of authority, stripped of control. I don't want this to be casual. Her breath hitched. Daniel, I don't do things halfway. That was true in business and in love. She swallowed. You shouldn't invest in something you don't fully understand. He leaned closer. Then help me understand. For a split second, just a split second, her resolve wavered. She wanted to close the distance. She wanted to forget why she had walked into that gala in the first place. But then, her phone vibrated again on the desk behind them. This time, the screen lit up long enough for Daniel to see a single word before it dimmed. Proceed. Eleanor quickly stood. I should get back to work, she said too quickly. Daniel rose slowly, sensing the shift but not the cause. Did I say something wrong? She forced a faint smile. No, but her eyes said something else. He stepped toward her once more. If there's something you're afraid to tell me. There is, she whispered internally. But what she said out loud was, there isn't. Daniel searched her face, as if trying to read a contract hidden behind her expression. Finally he nodded. I'm not giving up, he said quietly. After he left, the studio felt colder. Eleanor walked to her desk and picked up her phone. A new message had arrived. Board approval confirmed. Phase 1 begins next week. She stared at the text for a long time. Then her gaze shifted to the silver ring on her finger. Mom, she whispered, voice trembling for the first time. I didn't expect him to feel like this. Outside, Daniel stood beside his car, looking up at the studio window. For the first time in his life, he had fallen for something he couldn't control. And Eleanor? She was discovering that revenge was far easier when the target didn't look at you like you were worth saving. It started with silence. Daniel sent a message that morning. Breakfast? No reply. He told himself she was working. She often lost track of time inside that studio, lost between centuries-old brushstrokes and forgotten faces. By noon he called. Straight to voicemail. By evening, something unfamiliar settled into his chest. Unease. At 9:17 p.m., Daniel stood outside Hale Restoration Atelier. The lights were off. That had never happened before. He knocked. Nothing. He tried the handle. Locked. A small white notice was taped to the inside of the glass door. Closed until further notice. No explanation. No date. No signature. His reflection stared back at him through the dark window. He called again. Voicemail. He checked her social media. Deactivated. Her number. No longer in service. Daniel felt something inside him drop. Not anger. Not yet. Loss. He contacted his assistant. Find out where she is, he said calmly. But beneath the calm was steel. Within hours he had answers. The studio lease had been terminated 2 days ago. The apartment she rented? Vacated that morning. No forwarding address. No digital trail. No financial activity. It was as if Eleanor Hale had never existed. Daniel drove through the city long after midnight, passing places they had walked together. The balcony at the Gala Hotel. The Riverside Cafe she liked. The bookstore where she once showed him a first edition painting manual and smiled like it was treasure. Everywhere felt haunted. He replayed their conversations in his mind. Her questions. Her pauses. The way she would look at him sometimes, not like a woman falling in love but like someone measuring something. And then, the message he saw on her phone. Proceed. A crack formed in his certainty. At 2:43 a.m., Daniel returned to the studio one last time. He didn't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe desperation. The street was quiet. Rain had begun to fall lightly, blurring neon reflections across the pavement. And that was when he saw it. Across the street, parked under a broken streetlight. A black sedan. The same model he'd noticed outside the Gala Hotel weeks ago. The same tinted windows. It pulled away slowly as his headlights turned the corner. Daniel stood frozen in the rain. This wasn't coincidence. Back in his car, he opened his phone and searched his company archives. He typed 2 words. Hale Finance. The name surfaced like a ghost from the past. 8 years ago. A mid-sized investment firm that collapsed after a strategic acquisition by Kwon Industries. Filed under non-performing asset liquidation. Daniel remembered it vaguely. He had been new then. Hungry. Proving himself. The decision had been bold. Aggressive. Necessary. Or so he thought. He opened the case file. And there it was. The founder's name. Michael Hale. His breath stilled. The black and white photo in her studio. The finance background. The resentment in her voice. The way she had asked if he slept well at night. It all aligned with terrifying precision. Daniel leaned back in his seat as rain struck the windshield harder. Eleanor hadn't disappeared. She had withdrawn. Strategically. And for the first time since meeting her, Daniel didn't feel like a man who had lost a woman. He felt like a man who had just walked into a war he didn't know had begun. Somewhere in the city, Eleanor sat in a dark apartment overlooking the skyline. Her phone buzzed again. Phase 1 complete, a voice said through the speaker. She closed her eyes briefly. Good, she replied. But her voice trembled. Because disappearing was easy. Walking away from him? That was the first thing she had done that truly hurt. The emergency board meeting was called at 8 a.m. By 8:07, Daniel knew something was wrong. The room felt different. Not tense, calculated. The directors avoided his eyes. The CFO kept adjusting his glasses. A stack of printed reports sat neatly arranged in front of every board member except him. Hostile takeover attempt. The words echoed across the long glass table like a gunshot. Daniel remained still. By who? He asked calmly. The projector screen flickered to life. A logo appeared first. Then a name. Hale Strategic Holdings. The air left the room. And then, the doors opened. Every head turned. She walked in wearing white. Not soft studio white. Corporate white. Sharp blazer. Structured trousers. Hair sleek and pulled back. No loose waves. No paint stains. No softness. Eleanor Hale crossed the room with steady steps and placed a leather folder on the table. She did not look at Daniel immediately. Professional. Composed. Unrecognizable. Good morning, she said evenly. I represent Hale Strategic Holdings, majority stakeholder in the newly acquired Kwon Industries debt portfolio. Daniel felt something cold move through his veins. Debt portfolio? Impossible. Unless. He looked at the CFO. The man dropped his gaze. Betrayal. Eleanor finally lifted her eyes. And met his. No balcony moonlight. No warmth. Only resolve. You sold. Daniel asked the CFO quietly. It was legal, the CFO stammered. We needed liquidity. You needed greed, Daniel corrected. Eleanor opened her folder and slid documents across the table. With the current share distribution, she said, voice steady, we now hold enough leverage to initiate restructuring. Restructuring. The same word Daniel had once used so casually. The same word that had dismantled her father's company. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Is this personal? Daniel asked her directly. The room stilled. Eleanor's expression did not change. This is business. But her voice wasn't as cold as she intended. Daniel stood slowly. The power dynamic shifted instantly. He didn't look like a man under attack. He looked like a king evaluating a challenger. You disappeared, he said quietly. This isn't the place for that conversation. You made it the place. Flicker. Just a flicker. Then she straightened. 8 years ago, Kwon Industries acquired Hale Finance under the pretense of partnership, she said. Within 6 months, you liquidated its assets. The board murmured. Daniel's jaw tightened. It was failing. It was destabilized, she corrected. By you. The projector screen changed. A scanned document filled the wall. Signature at the bottom. Daniel Kwon. Date. 8 years ago. The weight of the past settled heavily in the room. You signed it, Eleanor said. Silence roared. Daniel stared at the document. He remembered the night. Young. Determined. Pressured by investors. Proving himself. He had seen numbers. Not people. You destroyed my father's life, she finished. There it was. The truth. Not whispered. Not hidden. Declared. The boardroom felt too small. Daniel finally met her gaze again. And so you came for mine. She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. You once said winning means someone else loses. Her silver ring caught the fluorescent light. Today, she said softly, it's your turn. The board meeting dissolved into chaos. Lawyers arguing. Directors panicking. But Daniel didn't hear any of it. He only saw her. And beneath the armor he saw something else. Pain. Conflict. This wasn't satisfaction. This was sacrifice. Because the way her hand trembled, just barely, told him one thing. She hadn't expected it to hurt this much either. And for the first time in his career, Daniel Kwon wasn't fighting for control. He was fighting for her. The media exploded within hours. Hale Strategic Holdings targets Kwon Industries in stunning takeover move. Photos of Eleanor in her white suit flooded financial news outlets. Headlines called her brilliant, ruthless, calculated. They had no idea how personal it was. Inside her temporary office overlooking Gangnam, Eleanor stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed tightly. Below, the city moved as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. Her phone buzzed. Public sentiment is leaning in our favor, said the voice on the other end. Cold, male-controlled. Kwon's board is fractured. Phase 2 will destabilize investor confidence. Eleanor's jaw tightened. And Daniel, the voice continued. Is he reacting emotionally? She hesitated. A mistake. Yes, she said quietly. A soft chuckle came through the speaker. Good. Emotional leaders make reckless decisions. After the call ended, Eleanor lowered the phone slowly. She hated that sentence. Because Daniel wasn't reckless. He had looked at her in that boardroom not with anger, but with recognition. And it unsettled her. Her gaze drifted to the silver ring on her finger. She remembered the night her father came home 8 years ago. Silent. Defeated. The man who once built empires reduced to staring at legal documents across the dining table. They're restructuring us, he had said. Within months, Hale Finance collapsed. Investors withdrew. Lawsuits mounted. Reputation destroyed. Her father never recovered from the humiliation. He died 2 years later. Heart failure, the doctors said. But Eleanor always believed it was heartbreak. And at the bottom of the acquisition order, Daniel Kwon's signature. Back in his office, Daniel stood alone in the dark. He had ordered a full internal investigation. And what he discovered unsettled him. The Hale acquisition file was incomplete. Missing pages. Altered timestamps. Transactions rerouted through offshore intermediaries. He scrolled through archived emails from 8 years ago. There. One forwarded memo from the former CFO. Subject. Accelerated liquidation strategy. Attached recommendation. Push immediate asset strip. Do not allow recovery window. Daniel frowned. He didn't remember approving that level of aggression. He had signed off on restructuring, not destruction. Another detail caught his eye. The former CFO resigned 6 months after the Hale collapse. Now listed as a senior advisor to Hale Strategic Holdings. Daniel leaned back slowly. This wasn't just Eleanor's revenge. Someone else was steering the ship. And she might not even see it. That evening, Eleanor agreed to a televised interview. The host smiled brightly. Ms. Hale, many are calling this poetic justice. Is this takeover personal? She held the camera's gaze. No, she said smoothly. It's about accountability. But when the segment ended and the studio lights dimmed, she saw him. Daniel stood at the back of the room, watching. He hadn't clapped, hadn't moved, just watched. She approached him cautiously. You shouldn't be here. You're being manipulated, he said quietly. Her expression hardened instantly. That's what men say when they're losing control. He stepped closer. The CFO who handled your father's case? He's advising you now. A flicker of doubt passed through her eyes. That's impossible. He profited from Hale's collapse. Silence. You're lying, she whispered. I'm trying to protect you. Her breath hitched. Protect me, she repeated bitterly. From consequences you created? Daniel's voice lowered. I signed restructuring papers. I didn't order destruction. Intent doesn't undo damage. No, he agreed softly. But maybe the damage wasn't entirely mine. For the first time since launching her attack, Eleanor felt something dangerous. Uncertainty. And somewhere in the shadows outside the studio entrance, a familiar black sedan waited, watching them both. Because revenge in white was powerful. But the real mastermind? He was still dressed in black. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. Daniel's words echoed in her mind like a fracture spreading through glass. The CFO profited from Hale's collapse. Maybe the damage wasn't entirely mine. She told herself it was manipulation. A desperate man rewriting history. But doubt is a quiet thing. And once it enters, it doesn't leave easily. The archive room. The next morning, Eleanor walked into Hale Strategic Holdings' private archive division. Pull the original liquidation files, she instructed her assistant. Not the summarized copies. The raw transfers. Within an hour, boxes of documents sat open before her. She moved with precision, like restoring a damaged painting, layer by layer, transaction by transaction. And then, she saw it. A wire transfer made 3 weeks before Hale Finance collapsed. From an offshore account linked to the former CFO of Kwon Industries, into a shell corporation. That shell corporation later became the primary investor behind Hale Strategic Holdings. Her breath stilled. That was impossible. She scrolled further. More irregularities. Approval timestamps that didn't match Daniel's digital signature log. Board meeting minutes altered after submission. And then, an internal memo, marked confidential, from the former CFO. CEO approval secured. Liquidate aggressively before Hale stabilizes. Do not allow intervention. But attached beneath it, a digital verification stamp. Forged. Eleanor's hands trembled. This was true. Daniel hadn't destroyed her father's company alone. He had been used. Just like her. Daniel's investigation. Across the city, Daniel sat with his legal team. The CFO resigned right after the Hale collapse. His attorney confirmed. We assumed it was routine. Track his financial growth, Daniel ordered. Every asset. The numbers came back within minutes. Exponential. Unexplained. He made more in 2 years post-resignation than in a decade with us, the attorney said quietly. Daniel leaned back. The puzzle pieces aligned. The black sedan. The hidden debt acquisitions. The carefully timed destabilization. Someone had orchestrated Hale Finance's collapse. Then waited 8 years. Then funded Eleanor's revenge from behind the curtain. And she didn't even know. The confrontation. Daniel requested a private meeting. Neutral ground. An empty rooftop parking structure overlooking the city at dusk. She almost didn't go. But she did. Wind whipped through the open space as she stepped out of her car. Daniel stood near the edge, jacket moving in the breeze. You were right, she said quietly before he could speak. He turned. She held out printed documents. The liquidation memo was altered. The timestamp doesn't match your authorization. He studied her face. You checked. I restore damaged things, she replied. I know what tampering looks like. He stepped closer. Your father's collapse was accelerated. Deliberately. By him, she finished. They both knew who. The former CFO. Now advising her board. Funding her operation. Feeding her vengeance. A long silence stretched between them. The city glowed below. I hated you, she admitted, voice breaking slightly. For years. Daniel nodded slowly. I hated myself too. Her eyes lifted to his. But you still signed it. Yes, he said. And I should have looked deeper. That was the difference. He wasn't denying his part. He was owning it. The wind quieted for a moment. You weren't the mastermind, she whispered. No, he agreed. But I was the weapon. The realization hit her fully. Her revenge had been guided, directed, engineered. She had been a chess piece in someone else's war. And if Phase 2 moved forward, Kwon Industries wouldn't be the only casualty. The market destabilization plan would crash multiple mid-sized firms. Families, employees, innocent people. Her father had been collateral damage once. Was she about to create more? Daniel stepped closer. We can stop this, he said quietly. We? She asked. He extended his hand, not as a CEO, as a man. You wanted accountability, he said. Let's give it to the right person. For the first time since that gala, Eleanor felt something stronger than revenge. Truth. And somewhere in a penthouse office across the city, the former CFO watched surveillance footage from the parking structure and smiled, because he knew something they didn't. Phase 2 was already in motion. Phase 2 began at 9 a.m. By 9:03 the market was bleeding. Financial news alerts flashed across every major screen in Seoul. Kwon Industries under coordinated market pressure. Aggressive short positions trigger sector instability. Stocks plummeted. Investors panicked. Mid-sized partner firms, companies with nothing to do with Hale Finance, were dragged into the spiral. Eleanor stared at the data feed in horror. This wasn't the plan, she whispered. Her assistant looked pale. The liquidation algorithm was activated automatically at market open. Automatic. She hadn't authorized it. Her phone buzzed. The former CFO's name lit up. She answered immediately. You moved early, she said sharply. A calm chuckle echoed through the speaker. You hesitated, he replied. Emotion makes people unreliable. You said this would target Kwon Industries only. And it is. Collateral damage is unavoidable. Collateral damage. The same words that had once been used about her father's employees. Her chest tightened. Stop the algorithm, she demanded. It's already cascading. To pull it now would expose us. Us? She repeated coldly. There was a pause. You wanted justice, he said. This is how justice works. The line went dead. Across the city, Daniel watched the market collapse in real time. His board was in chaos. We need to counter-liquidate, one director shouted. Stabilize internally, another argued. Daniel remained still. Then he made a decision. Freeze our defensive retaliation. The room fell silent. Sir? His legal advisor asked cautiously. If we counterattack, the crash doubles. Smaller firms won't survive. You're protecting competitors. Someone scoffed. No, Daniel replied calmly. I'm protecting people. He stood. Prepare a public statement. We're absorbing short-term losses to stabilize the sector. It would cost him billions. His reputation. Possibly his position as CEO. He didn't hesitate. The choice. Eleanor arrived at Kwon headquarters without SC. Security didn't stop her. She walked straight into the executive floor. Daniel stood near the window when she entered. The city outside looked fragile, like glass about to shatter. You froze retaliation, she said. Yes. You could lose everything. He turned to face her. I almost destroyed your father's company because I moved too aggressively. A pause. I won't repeat that mistake. Her breath caught. This is bigger than us, she whispered. I know. Silence. Then she stepped closer. He triggered the algorithm early. He wanted maximum damage. Daniel's eyes darkened. He's trying to bury the evidence under chaos. She nodded. If I expose him now, Hale Strategic Holdings collapses too. You'll lose your leverage, Daniel said. I'll lose everything I built. He stepped closer, voice steady. You didn't build this. He did. Through you. The truth cut deep. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. For 8 years I believed destroying you would heal me. And now. She looked at him, really looked at him. I don't want revenge anymore. The words felt like surrender. And freedom. Daniel reached for her hand. If we expose him together, he said, we both fall. Public investigations. Shareholder backlash. Lawsuits, she listed quietly. He nodded. Love or justice? She asked softly. He held her gaze. Justice is love. If it protects the innocent. Her composure cracked then. Not dramatically. Just enough. I don't know if I'm strong enough to lose everything twice. You won't, he said. Why are you so sure? Because this time, he answered gently, you won't be alone. Outside, financial markets trembled. Inside, two people stood at the edge of ruin. Eleanor pulled out her phone. The CFO's private transaction files were still open. One tap. She could forward everything to regulatory authorities. Expose him. End this. And end her own company in the process. Her thumb hovered. Daniel didn't rush her. Didn't pressure her. He simply stood beside her. With her. She closed her eyes briefly. Then, she pressed send. Across the city, in a penthouse office filled with screens, an alert flashed. Regulatory inquiry initiated. For the first time, the former CFO's smile disappeared. And for the first time since this began, Eleanor felt lighter. Not victorious. Not satisfied. But free. The market would still fall. Their reputations would still suffer. But the truth? The truth was finally moving. And love. Love was no longer their weakness. It was their rebellion. The fallout was immediate. Regulatory authorities launched a full investigation within 48 hours. Financial networks replayed clips of Eleanor's interview beside breaking headlines about corruption, fraud, and executive conspiracy. The former CFO was arrested within the week. Charges: market manipulation, corporate sabotage, falsification of executive authorization, securities fraud. The truth unraveled fast. He had engineered Hale Finance's collapse to profit from asset stripping. He had manipulated Daniel's early inexperience. He had waited years building capital quietly, waiting for the perfect emotional catalyst. Eleanor. Hale Strategic Holdings dissolved under investigation. Investors withdrew. Board members resigned. Everything she built over 8 years disappeared in less than 8 days. Kwon Industries survived, but barely. Daniel stepped down temporarily as CEO during the inquiry. Not because he was found guilty of fraud, but because he signed without questioning deeply enough. I was responsible, he told the press calmly. Leadership means accountability. For the first time in his career, the headlines weren't about power. They were about integrity. Weeks later, the city had quieted. Markets stabilized. Scandals faded into newer distractions. Eleanor stood once more in front of the old art studio space. The windows were empty now. For lease. She hadn't decided what came next. She only knew revenge no longer defined her. A familiar car pulled up beside the curb. Daniel stepped out. No security. No corporate armor. Just him. You look different, she said softly. So do you. There was no tension now. No strategy. Only truth. I lost everything, she admitted. He shook his head gently. You lost something built on pain. She looked at her hand. The silver ring still rested there. For years, she said. I wore this to remember what love cost my mother. Daniel stepped closer. And now. She slowly slid the ring off her finger. The gesture made his breath still. I was wrong, she whispered. Love isn't about cost. She stepped toward him. It's about choice. She took his hand and placed the ring in his palm. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Not because I'm letting go of her, she said softly, but because I'm choosing something new. Daniel closed his fingers around the ring carefully, reverently. Then let's build something that doesn't destroy anyone, he said. She smiled, finally free of grief's shadow. Months later, a new sign appeared on that same street. Hale and Kwon Foundation for Ethical Enterprise, a nonprofit dedicated to corporate transparency, startup protection, and ethical restructuring. No more silent collapses. No more manipulated signatures. No more collateral damage. At the grand opening, Eleanor stood beside Daniel. Not behind him, not opposing him. Beside him. Reporters asked if their partnership was personal or professional. Daniel glanced at her. Eleanor smiled. Both, she answered. And this time, when she slipped the silver ring back onto her finger, It no longer symbolized loss. It symbolized forgiveness, not of the past, but of each other. And that was stronger than revenge ever could be.